Welcome to Resolve IBS and IBD Naturally. I'm Courtney Cowie, a nutrition therapy and functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner. If you are struggling with the symptoms of IBS or IBD and want to get to the root cause of your symptoms so you can take back your health through a whole person approach, this podcast is for you. Just a disclaimer that the information I'm presenting in this podcast is for educational purposes only and should not be taken as medical advice. You should always consult a qualified practitioner before making any changes to your health or medical regimen. That being said, let's get on with the show. Well, Tammy, I'm really looking forward to our conversation today about fibromyalgia. I know when you and I first connected, we were talking about just the crossover between conditions like IBS and fibromyalgia. So I have a really strong hunch that a lot of people listening to this podcast are struggling with fibro, whether they're diagnosed or not diagnosed. And as you know, there's just interesting parallels with IBS and fibromyalgia because they kind of fall into that gray area of conditions that aren't really definite diagnostic criteria, right? Like there's a lot of these clusters of symptoms, but then people will go into the doctor and often just kind of get left with this diagnosis of exclusion that doesn't really mean anything. So I think you'll be able to bring a lot of interesting insight from the fibromyalgia end. But to start, why don't you talk a little bit about your background, how you got into this work, and why fibromyalgia for you?
Oh, yes. Well, that last question is the easiest. I got into fibromyalgia because I was diagnosed with it.
There you go.
So that
Yeah.
was in 2007. Yeah, I was married about 6 months. And so, yeah. But way before that, if we go way, way back, IBS is really one of the first things that I struggled with. And I was a kid. Back in the 70s, if I, mention my age, we weren't thinking things like that. But if I was a kid now, 100%, I would have been diagnosed with IBS, as early as I remember having issues in third grade, fourth grade.
Oh.
Yeah, I won't go into all the gory details, but I mean, um, I remember doing the exams where you drink the barium shakes and they watch
Yeah.
everything go through, and not just once, but a couple of times. So,
Yeah.
it was pretty bad. And so that really was my first um, real, I won't say chronic pain because that I didn't experience pain so much. It was just the not going. For me, it was more about constipation.
Yeah.
And that, at such a young age, like my parents always joked, they took me to the doctor for maintenance because I just always had something that was going wrong. And they always had to, okay, what is it this time?
Mhm.
And then after that, of course, that just like continued throughout my life. But my first real chronic pain diagnosis was I was diagnosed with chronic daily headaches and migraines when I was in high school.
Oh, wow.
So I have a very long history with chronic illness.
Yeah. Wow. So like
Yeah.
thinking back to some of this stuff, did you have any intuition once you kind of got into the holistic health space as to some of the potential things that might have set the stage for first the IBS issues and then later like the chronic pain issues in high school?
Yes, yes, definitely. So the other thing that I had, the other maintenance issues, I also had a lot of ear infections and a lot of, like eventually I had my tonsils taken out, tubes put in my ears, things like that. So there was a lot of antibiotics in my life.
Yeah, totally. Such a classic thing in the 70s, 80s. I'm a child of the 80s, so I wasn't far behind you. Very similar to them too, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And I mean, the things that we know now, we didn't know then, and it is what it is?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. But it sounds like your parents at least had some awareness and were willing to recognize something wasn't totally right and take you into the doctor and at least have these checks done. And I mean, I feel you, Tammy, because I for years too struggled with GI symptoms and even good GI doctors, well, I thought they were good GI doctors, like missed things in my situation. I did the barium swallow test as well, and nobody like again, and this wasn't that far back. This was probably even as of the 2000s as an adult at that point still getting kind of workups done. Like nobody thought to check me for celiac genes, any of that, wheat sensitivity. So yeah, I feel you. This is why we need to have this conversation because I still feel like as even though it's progressed and we're at a better place now, just the conventional approach doesn't have the tools and the methods to always have a good framework to understand these things, right?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And our Western medicine is all very compartmentalized, right?
Mhm.
So I saw the neurologist for the headaches. I saw the GI guys for the IBS. I see the fibro people for the fibromyalgia, but it's really all connected,
Yeah.
right? And so without taking that step back and looking at the whole picture, and sometimes that takes somebody outside your medical team, somebody like you or
Absolutely.
me that works with our clients in that way to be able to look at the whole picture,
Yeah,
right? It's really necessary for that. And not all doctors have the same education either, right? Like
exactly.
it's something like 9 hours of pain education here in the US. I think
Oh,
Canada
wow.
is maybe 18 hours, but that is all pain. That's not even chronic pain, right? And
Yeah.
then everything else on top of that. So, our poor primary care doctors, they get to know this much about a lot of things.
Yeah.
And so it's not really their fault either, I don't think.
Yeah.
It's just partly a product of the situation, right?
Oh, for sure. I did not know that. Coming from like the nutrition heavy angle, I definitely knew doctors got very little hours in nutritional education, but I did not know about the pain piece. So that's so fascinating. And being a
Yeah.
body work therapist as well, I know that, when people will come to me, not necessarily with fibromyalgia or diagnosed with it at least, I do have a few of those, but like they'll be like, well, if I go to the doctor, what will happen? Well, often it's a PT referral or some sort of pain relief medication. And those are kind of your two options, as you probably know, right? And just not a lot of digging deeper to really understand what might be driving that, right?
Mhm. That's right. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And, fibromyalgia is a complicated thing, right?
Yeah.
It tends to sometimes it shows up first, but more often it shows up after other things. I think this is just Tammy theory. This isn't proven or anything like that. But I
Yeah.
think there is something that happens to us where there's like this switch that gets flipped and
Mhm.
it sort of pushes us over the edge into fibromyalgia. And I know that was for sure my case. I told you about some of my childhood, but I also, right before I was diagnosed, I had spent 9 years working for a software company. I managed the support department. So the call
Oh,
center, the email support, customer events that we did, all of that went through my department. And it was a really stressful job.
I can
Nobody called us
imagine.
just to say hi. They
Mhm.
all called us when they had a problem.
Yeah.
So it was definitely a challenge. And so coming off of that, I think all of that chronic stress was the thing that's flipped the switch. And
Yeah.
I was diagnosed, like I said, in 2007. And that I was actually diagnosed right around the time of the very first fibro medication that was approved.
Oh,
So there weren't a lot of options. And now we actually just had a fourth medication approved just a little while ago.
oh my
But there are a few more options. There is a little bit more education, but it is still a lot of trying to figure things out, trying
Mhm.
to find the people who have the right answers, doing your own research. It still can be a struggle for folks. And that's why I do what I do, right?
Oh, for sure, Tammy. Yeah. And not knowing a lot about the fibromyalgia medications, if they're anything like the autoimmune class of drugs, right? Usually it's modulating and blocking the immune system, which temporarily, or we could say artificially, seems to reduce the symptoms, but there's always a trade-off, right? A negative trade-off to that too, which can, again, if you're a savvy consumer of healthcare, you know that, and then you have to ask yourself that question: am I okay doing this now for the rest of my life, if it even quote unquote works, right?
Right,
um what
right.
I want
And
to
when you're
ask.
talking chronic pain, you're also talking pain medications, right?
Yes,
Which come
yes,
with a whole other category of concerns and questions
yes,
and
yes, yeah.
decisions to make, right?
Absolutely, Tammy. Yeah. What I want to ask you, I was thinking to myself, we should probably like make it pretty obvious to people listening who maybe don't totally understand fibromyalgia. what are the potential symptoms of fibromyalgia, right? Like just at a very basic level that might tip somebody to think like, wow, this could be actually me struggling with this.
Yes, that is a really good point.
Yeah.
We should talk about
I
that.
was like, wait, back it up here. Back it up.
Rewind. Yeah. So there are like there's a whole constellation of things that come with fibromyalgia, but really there are four main symptoms. Widespread body pain is really the hallmark of fibromyalgia. And the thing about fibro pain is that it's not associated with any particular damage in your body. So like if you look at an X-ray, you look fine, like all the things, right?
Yeah.
Also, fibro pain moves around. So your legs might hurt one day, your back and your neck might hurt another day, your stomach might hurt. So that is one thing that I think your listeners can think about. If my
Yeah.
pain is in my belly, that's one thing. But
Yeah.
if that pain starts to move around outside of that, then that could be fibromyalgia. We also do have unrefreshing sleep, which is a big one. We'll sleep and sleep and sleep and wake up and feel like you never slept at all.
Yeah.
So that's a biggie. Fatigue. And it's a different kind of fatigue. It's not just being tired. We have a smaller capacity for energy. There's actually some mitochondrial dysfunction. So we're like those old cell phone batteries that you'd charge all night and they might last a few minutes, right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
more like us. And then we do also have some cognitive dysfunction or brain fog. And so I think the things to think about, obviously there's a few things that are different there
Yeah.
versus IBS and some of those kinds of conditions. But the other aspect of fibromyalgia that I always like to point out to folks is that it is an amplifier. So
Mm.
whatever pain you have, fibromyalgia will take that and turn up the volume.
Mm.
So, if you are experiencing gut pain, for instance, fibromyalgia will take that and make everything else hurt and make your gut pain hurt more, right?
Interesting.
So, we have to address the underlying, we have to address the fibromyalgia, but we also have to address all those other underlying triggers of pain,
Yeah.
right? So, we can't get fibromyalgia fully managed if we're not also treating the migraines, the IBS, the whatever else is going on.
Yeah. Kind of like that systemic inflammation, right?
Right.
And then another question I wanted to ask you too, because this is just something I've personally seen working with people, is I don't think I've ever met a man who struggles with fibromyalgia. So statistically, do you know like how many men are affected by that condition?
Yeah. So, statistically speaking, it is something like 6.4% of women and 4 point something percent of men. So
Okay.
it is fewer men than women, but
Okay.
between us and everybody else listening, I think part of what's happening there is guys don't go to the doctor.
Yeah, very true.
Right? If
Yeah.
something hurts, they just keep going, right? Like I'm always surprised when my husband is like, "Oh my gosh, my I can barely lift my arm." I'm like, "I would have checked that out way before we got to this point." Right?
Right.
So I think a lot of guys don't go to the doctor, and I think it is seen as a women's illness.
Yeah.
So guys are less likely to be diagnosed even if they do go. Right?
Oh,
Like they might be
yeah.
diagnosed with lower back pain or something,
Yeah.
but not actually get the fibromyalgia diagnosis. So I think there's a few factors there, but statistically speaking, it is, at least right now, more women than men being diagnosed.
Oh, very interesting. And I would not have thought about just even like the conventional provider bias on that because now that you say that, Tammy, that does strike me as like kind of spot on. Like when I hear the word fibromyalgia, I automatically picture a woman in my mind. I would rarely, but I'm listening to your list of symptoms. I'm like, wow, that could actually be a number of male clients that I've worked with over time too, which prompted me to ask the question. So this leads to the next question. How do doctors actually diagnose fibromyalgia, if at all, right? Or is it kind of like IBS where it's a diagnosis of exclusion?
It has its own diagnostic criteria, so it's not 100% a diagnosis of exclusion, but
Okay.
there also isn't a definitive diagnostic that says you have fibromyalgia. Like there isn't a blood
Mm.
test, they can see things on stuff like functional MRIs, but that's not something that's used in a clinic, right? So
Yeah,
we
yeah.
don't really have an external objective measuring, yes, you have fibromyalgia. So there are a lot of other things that we do have to exclude, right?
Mm.
Because those symptoms can be so many things. So we
Right.
do want to rule out, is this not just your thyroid? Is this not just a sleeping problem? Is this not just a magnesium deficiency or, whatever it might be? We do have to look at those things, and you can have fibromyalgia and other stuff. So
Yeah.
somebody, goes through those diagnostics and discover, oh, yes, you do have lupus. You can have lupus and fibromyalgia,
Mm.
right?
Yeah. So interesting. So like, yeah, and just even too thinking back on like when I've come across people with fibromyalgia and even things like rheumatoid arthritis, I think there can be quite a bit of crossover too, like lupus as well, because there's a degree of pain with that. So when you've seen clients that are coming in and let's say they've got maybe two or three of these different diagnoses plus fibromyalgia, like where would you start? How would you approach that, Tammy, right?
Right, right, because it can be a bit of a mess. So yeah, if people get a fibromyalgia diagnosis, that's usually based on patient reporting of symptoms. We do take into consideration what you've been diagnosed with, what you haven't, what came back negative. We also look at certain places in your body where you have pain. So
Yeah.
we look at all of that. And then when somebody comes to me as a coach and they like, hey, here's my list of diagnoses. My best friend calls them the evil sidekicks. And I don't know, she added up once that I was like 30 some odd evil sidekicks with her fibromyalgia. And I don't know, there's lots of ways you can approach this.
Yeah.
As a coach, I think the best way in the for most people is to pick the low-hanging fruit, right?
Yeah.
Like let's start getting some wins,
Yes.
because so often we feel like we can't do things
Mhm.
because we've had all these roadblocks, we've had these challenges. So I like to start my clients off with, the simple easy things that can help you feel better and feel like, oh, maybe I can do something, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes that might be treating another condition. Like if somebody comes to me and they're really, really struggling, they have been diagnosed with migraine and they have them all the time. There are lots of good treatments out there for migraine. I might start actually there. Because
Yeah.
if we can bring that down, that helps everything, right? Because fibro is an amplifier. Sometimes, like this actually just happened last week, I might have somebody that is maybe not quite on the right dose of a medication. So last week, the situation was somebody was on Lyrica, which is one of the FDA approved fibro meds, but she was still on the ramp up dose, like the starting dose. She had never
Oh.
been moved to the actual therapeutic dose.
Ah, gotcha.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was the first thing for her was, hey, you need to talk to your doctor and see, is there a reason? I mean, I'm not a doctor. I can't tell you to not take your meds, but you can
Right.
have that conversation and say, hey, is there a reason you have me on this dose? The therapeutic dose for fibromyalgia is actually this, which was double
Mhm.
what she was taking.
Totally.
So, the
Totally.
simple changes like that. Sometimes I'll look at things like what's going to give us the biggest bang for the buck, right? Is there one thing that'll maybe help a bunch of stuff,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It just kind of depends on the client, what their biggest challenge is, what their goals are, what they want to accomplish, what's important to them, and
Yeah.
really go after those things. My perspective is that fibromyalgia is not really the problem. The problem is you not being able to live the life you want.
Right.
So,
Right.
how do we make that happen? Which usually means we need to make your fibro better, right?
Right.
But
Right.
but there's lots of ways to get you back to living your life that don't require, a prescription or a doctor or a specific treatment or a.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, Tammy. And like what I hear you say, which is so awesome, and this is kind of the beauty of the coaching element that, can be so vital to helping very multifaceted conditions like this with the brain fog and the energy challenges, is that just having somebody who can, with a lot of experience and understanding, take a look at the whole picture and then be your advocate, help you advocate for what might be the first best step, or make sense of all of the information that you're bringing in the door, which is just helping you decide, okay, what is the best thing to do here, along with just making decisions based on energy efficiency and economy of energy. Because I'm sure, like, I get this even in my practice with IBS and IBD, because they can be so depleting, right? Those conditions. It's like sometimes people are really motivated to make all these changes, but we have to consider, like, what is your energy available right now? And realistically, like, what can you do? You might want to be eating a whole foods diet 80%, but if you're only at 10 or 20% right now, and the thought of chopping vegetables for 30 minutes makes you want to pass out, that maybe isn't the place to start, right?
Exactly, exactly. So much yes. I
Yeah.
will say that it is more often that I tell clients to do less than telling them
Yeah.
to do more
Yeah.
because especially if somebody gets to the point where they've hired a coach, they're ready and willing to do the work, right?
Yep.
And so they want to go from that 10-20% to 80%. And, we as the coaches are the ones who are like, let's maybe go for 25.
Right. 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 Yeah.
Right, because we want it to be doable, we want it to be sustainable, I think
Mm.
that's the difference maybe to talking with a coach versus talking with your doctor, right? Your
Yeah.
doctor might say, "I want you to go gluten-free, read all the labels, do all the things, like, immediately, right now, go gluten-free."
Yeah.
And there may be times where you need to do that, right? If you've been diagnosed celiac, you don't wanna mess around, but
Right.
maybe for other people, the best way is let's cut out the big things. Let's cut out the bread. Let's cut out the pasta. Then maybe down the road we start reading salad dressing labels, right?
Exactly.
Because we want you to succeed at doing it. And if you have to
Exactly.
start reading all the labels, what are the chances you're actually going to do it?
Yeah, so true. So true. Yeah, that's so spot on. And I think, like, we can harp on this a little bit more for a second, Tammy, but I feel like sometimes in my world, because I do functional testing with my clients, they come in super excited and motivated about that. And it is fun. I love running tests. They're great. They can give us awesome information. But the part of the work we do that I feel like is consistently the most underrated and potentially underappreciated is the coaching skills, because you can run all the amazing tests and get all of the root cause data points that explain everything you've got going on, but that doesn't in and of itself give you a process that's going to get you from, like, point A to point B, which is where you want to be, where you're, like you said, living the life you want to, having the skills, having the behaviors and habits that are sustaining this level of health. And that is probably one of the hardest processes, I would say, arguably, to help get a person. It is and it isn't, right? Like, I think just figuring out where our own mental and emotional and habitual roadblocks are, and having this person advocating and helping to guide us and get us to sort of see what is it we can do and what do we want for ourselves. That is really where, like, the secret sauce is, in my opinion. I would love to hear you talk about that a little bit.
Yes. Oh, I totally agree. I totally agree. I think of my job as a coach like being the guide that maybe helps you climb Mount Everest, right? I'm going to tell you, no, we want to go this way. No, we need to rest right now. Like I'm the person who's walking beside you, helping you get to where you want to go. And I've been there before,
Yep.
right? And I feel like sometimes our doctors are maybe, I don't know, maybe the travel agent who helped you book the trip.
Right. Right.
Like, yes, they're helping you get where you want to go, but they're not walking beside you. They
No.
sometimes haven't even walked the road themselves, right? A lot of our
Exactly.
providers have never dealt with the things that we're struggling with. And I
Yeah.
think that makes such a difference. But yeah, and as a coach, I have a coach because
Yeah.
we can't see our own stuff. It
Exactly.
just gets we're stuck in the weeds, right? And we just can't see our own stuff, and we just need that outside perspective to
Yeah.
say, "Oh, did you look at this? Did you try this?" Or, "Oh, maybe you're tired right now because you got your flu shot and you are trying to change your sleep schedule and you increased your activity all at the same time." That was me
Yeah.
last week.
Right. Exactly.
You know?
Exactly. Yeah. So, do you find, I'm just curious about this because I know in my world with like the IBS, IBD stuff, there often is a very strong, um, I hesitate to say mental emotional because it makes it sound psychosomatic and it's not that, Tammy, but I would say there's a lot of just potentially repressed or suppressed or unconscious either life events or experiences or relationship issues that people struggling with IBS and IBD have had that are very much through the nervous system impacting their gut function as like a theme. And so I know anytime someone presents with that stuff, I'm going to have to at least evaluate on some level and give them some tools to work with. Whether they really glom onto that or not is kind of like individual to individual. But like, I'm curious about fibromyalgia. Do you see certain patterns of like lifestyle factors or mindsets or that type of thing in that general population?
Yes, definitely. So fibromyalgia almost always has some kind of a trauma trigger. And
Yeah.
that could be anything from physical trauma, like a car accident or an illness, a fall, those kinds of things,
Yeah.
to an emotional, mental, that sort of trauma, right? Like
Yeah.
abuse or my case, I think it was that stressful job, right?
Yeah.
That's its own
Yeah.
kind of trauma.
Yeah.
So there almost always is a trauma. So the question then becomes how much of that is still sticking around, right?
Yeah.
Especially that mental emotional part of it, right? You maybe are in a car accident and your body heals from the car accident, but there's still stuff going on. And maybe you've addressed the physical side of the trauma, but you haven't addressed the mental, emotional, nervous system side of the
Mhm.
trauma. And I think it's important to remember that trauma is what your body thinks it is. Right.
Yeah.
So sometimes I see people coming to me and it seems like it's such a small thing, that it didn't really bother them. It doesn't really bother anybody else, and yet that was still something that flipped that switch, right?
Yeah.
And sent their body over into fibromyalgia and seeing everything as pain. So I
Yeah.
think we do have to evaluate that, not that fibromyalgia is a psychosomatic illness. Like you said, it's a
Yeah.
real physical illness with real things going wrong in your body.
Yeah.
And our brains are powerful, how we think about our bodies, how we think about our illness. We sometimes just take a bad thing and make it worse,
Yeah.
right? Yes, you might be in constant pain because you have a chronic pain condition, but then we add on to that all the extra drama, right? What does it mean to be in pain? What does it mean to not be the mom I want to be? What does it mean that I have to keep canceling things? Well, what is it going to
Mhm.
mean for the rest of my life to
Yeah.
have this, right? Like we keep piling on all this stuff and
Yeah.
it jacks up our nervous systems and it makes it so that we can't get out of fight or flight. Even if you set aside all the mental trauma, maybe talk to a, psychologist kind of subject, right? If we set that aside, physiologically, we still have a jacked up nervous system,
Exactly.
right? That needs to get back out of fight or flight. And our stress about our fibromyalgia, or even sometimes our stress about our stress, right? There was
Yeah.
actually a study done where they looked at a whole bunch of people. I forget, it was like in the 100,000. It was a big study, and they found that the people who had the population group that had the most deaths were the people that thought stress was bad, and it was a higher number than the people who actually had worse stress than them.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
So our thoughts about our illness, about our bodies, about our life situation keep our nervous system jacked up, and we need to calm that back down. right? So I think it's something everybody needs to look at. And some people, it's a
Mhm.
bigger piece of the pie than others. You know, I've had a lot of clients who have said the missing piece for me was seeing my fibromyalgia in the context of my trauma. And for other people, it was like, oh yeah, that's right. I have to, make sure do my stress reduction practices, and that's the end of it, right?
Yeah.
So it just really varies, but absolutely, it's a big piece of this.
Yeah, I love so much of what you just said there. And I've heard it said too, like when you mentioned kind of just like, is it just this little thing that I'm maybe having an overt stress reaction to that a normal person wouldn't have? But it's you really what I found is you can't compare almost, right? Like in and just my own experience with going through different types of like trauma therapies or like nervous system support methods, right? What I've come to understand is that like a lot of where some of these like life experiences that we consider adverse or stressful that are stuck in the body, it's almost like that part of you frozen in time. And so I think a big piece of it is being able to go back sort of in that space and time to yourself at that given age and offer that compassion and be like, maybe as an adult looking back, I don't see that as being a big deal in the context of things, but to that child or to that individual at that point in time, that was actually a problem. That was a problem. Some boundary got violated. Something happened that activated the nervous system in a big way. And now the body's basically recorded that. And that's that sort of memory that we have to process fully and get out of the system. And I think too, just what you were saying at the end there, Tammy, about just so much of just mindset and perspective, all the way down to like the conditioning that we've received, right? Like a lot of us, I think, sometimes don't even feel like we've gone through big stressors per se, right? Like, but
Right.
what's so normal to me might be really not normal to somebody else. And that's where our own framework and context is important. And I know just as I've had to go through my own healing journey with IBS and IBD, it's like really sort of understanding in a new light, like some of my own thinking patterns that I just took it like face value normal would be considered pretty critical and harsh by someone else maybe who doesn't think that way, right? It's just a very enlightening journey to like inevitably opens up that potential for you to explore yourself in a new way, which is maybe the hidden gift in having a challenge, whether it's fibromyalgia or IBS, is like you have to kind of go through these layers of like rediscovering and almost reinventing yourself as you go through this healing process. Because I would argue to improve that condition holistically, you do have to change your own relationship with yourself and your own expression of yourself on some level, right? Like it has to evolve in some way.
Absolutely, absolutely. I know when I was fairly newly diagnosed, I mean, I shared a little bit about my history growing up in a body that didn't quite work right.
Yeah.
And I remember in high school, even like I was praying, talking to God, and I'm like, hey, if my body was a car, I would have qualified for the lemon law by now. Like this thing is broken. It doesn't work right. And
Yeah.
so I kind of had developed this attitude where there was me, like the real me inside, and I'm
Mhm.
stuck in this body that just doesn't work right. And so it was very much a me versus my body attitude, right?
Yeah.
And there's things really didn't shift for me until that got fixed, and that's
Yeah.
honestly thanks to my husband.
Yeah.
I was doing like we girls do, right, saying bad things about my body,
Yeah.
and he looked at me. We were still really newly married, and he looked at me and he said, every time you say stuff like that, you're really putting me down. What the heck? This doesn't have
Yeah.
anything to do with you. What are you talking about? And he's like, I think you're beautiful. I chose you. And every time you say things like that, you're basically calling me a liar.
Oh, that's amazing.
It like that was the moment. That was an absolute gift. And yeah, that shifted it for me, because I really started to think, whoa, hey, it was like a slap in the face, kind of, like let's rethink
Yeah.
this. And
Yeah.
really realizing that, our bodies are amazing,
Yeah.
right? They're designed to heal
Yes.
themselves, right? And so what I was doing was that antagonistic relationship with my body was really keeping my body from being able to do that,
Yeah.
right? Because I sort of treated it like the donkey that was misbehaving, right? And it just sort of, beating it into submission kind of thing, right? So I'd stay up, not get enough sleep, not eat the right things, even though I knew it was going to make me sick, like all the things, right? And
Yeah.
then just realizing, oh, yeah, no wonder my body isn't like supporting me the way I want her to because look at how I'm treating her. And if I can start that shift of my body and I want the same thing. We're on the same team, right?
Yeah.
I want to feel better. My body is made to heal.
Yeah.
Let me support her in that. And that really was a massive turning point for me. And I think you're 100% right. I think that there is a point where we can only go so far
Hmm.
until we heal that relationship because it's the foundation for everything we do, right?
Exactly.
Whether or not I eat what I'm supposed to eat, go to bed when I'm supposed to go to bed, take my supplements, my medications, stop and rest when my body is screaming for it, right?
Yeah.
Like it's that relationship with our bodies that fuels all of that.
Yeah, so true. So well said, Tammy. Yeah, I've really kind of reached that same conclusion as well. And I think you could pick any chronic inflammatory disorder and kind of really just sit and contemplate like the way that the disease is showing up in the body, right? And nine times out of 10, it's some degree of self-attack or lack of self-acceptance on some level. I mean, especially digestion, right? Like if you literally can't process your food, to what you just said, it's like if inside of your head there's a lot of self attack or criticism or negativity, you could be eating the most clean, organic, nutrient dense whole foods diet. And the vessel that's trying to actually process that and break it down is constantly, in the state of like, I'm not being loved, I'm not being appreciated, right? Like, good luck, right? Like you're fighting an uphill battle. And I mean, we make it sound so simple using these analogies. It's really not. It can be I personally think it's lifelong work. Like you're always getting better at it. And it's kind of two steps forward and one step back because truly, I think for a lot of us, a lot of this wiring was set early in life, which then makes it very ingrained in the brain and kind of this ongoing. I mean, coaching is this type of process too. Like you can never really get to this place of completion, which is why you said you have your own coach, right? Why I also have my own coach, why it's always good for all of us to be on a path of utilizing other resources and other supports and other people to help guide us because there's always going to be those blind spots. And I think it really like gives it context to think about like, doing all the physical supports are fine and good, but it definitely needs to be this whole person support process where you're looking at all the factors, lifestyle, mindset, all of it, right? I couldn't even go for a walk without planning my bathroom breaks. If you have IBSD or IBD and feel trapped by your gut, you're not alone. I used to plan my life around bathroom breaks until I found a 3-step solution that finally worked. To get my free guide, IBSD and IBD Relief, a 3-step solution to end bowel urgency and loose stool, click the link in the show notes below.
Yeah, yeah. And I think this can be a really slippery slope because it's not that far from what we're talking about
Mhm.
to saying that your illness is your fault, right? And
Yes.
that's not what we're saying here at
Yes.
all.
Exactly.
Um,
Yes.
but but how you think and how you treat yourself is an impact, right? It would be the
Yes.
same if you, I don't know, if you lived in an abusive household, right? Maybe the house up here is abusive,
Right,
right?
right. Exactly. Yeah, exactly, Tammy. And I think it can help sometimes to say that, if you think of it like being almost conditioned, right? Like as a child, children are just sponges and they sort of take their world at face value and they're not necessarily going through their life as like, well, how mom and dad talk about themselves isn't very loving. Like children don't have those thoughts. It just kind of imprints. And so I would never say, and I know you agree with this too, like it's never this conscious decision any of us make to say like, oh well, I'm gonna purposefully like create the conditions in my body to get ill. I think it's really kind of a bunch of things plus this like relationship that unfortunately gets wired into us that unfortunately doesn't have often a great healthy model to it, that is just like one of the biggest kind of pillars in this foundation that cracks when everything falls apart. And
Yeah.
so once you become conscious of it, that's when you can actually take the responsibility anew because you've now got that awareness. It's like, oh my God, like this whole component I wasn't aware of, like I need to be aware of this now and like start to actually work on this. And that's great because I mean ultimately the work we do, we're really trying to inspire and empower people that they have a lot more control over how their health is than what the conventional system would lead them to the believe. Rather than being told you have to be on a med, you have to just accept this now as your destiny. It's like, really, do I though? Because epigenetics really shows us that there's a lot of things we do have control over that can really, impact in a big way how the body functions, right?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And fibromyalgia is very much like that.
Yeah.
When we are diagnosed, most of us hear things like, get used to your new normal,
Yeah.
right? There's no cure, but, we can help you manage it. And it's true, there is no cure for
Right.
fibromyalgia, but
Right.
it can be managed to the point like I haven't had any fibromyalgia symptoms since 2018, I think.
Wow.
Right? No body pain. I have the energy to do what I want to do. I don't have brain fog. Like all of those things, I can live the life that I want to live. My fibromyalgia is in remission. We're not told that's possible,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And it's interesting. And there's probably a lot of reasons why that's the case, Tammy. I mean, I think a lot of it gets back to just how the medical paradigm is constructed. Doctors don't have time to sit down and teach people skills to reverse their symptoms, right? And there's a lot of incentive in keeping people on medications for a long period of time, right? Like there's a lot of factors that go into that. And I think there's also some degree of just protection and buffering that, like, I don't want to paint this picture of hope and possibility because what if you don't get there? Are you going to come back and hold me, the doctor, like liable for that or whatever, right? Like, there could be a lot of things going on there, but the potential is there. And like you said, I've seen it too. I've seen it with so many different conditions where, and it does sometimes take quite a bit of work and quite a bit of learning and guidance and one step at a time, walking the path. But like, I think if you're in that place where you're really starting to question, gosh, is this really the life that I'm going to have now for the next 40 years, 50 years, however old you are, right? And am I really going to have to be stuck on this medication? It's only really working 50% anyhow. Like this really should open the door to really start to think about what is possible because absolutely, Tammy, there's so many people that are able to reverse their condition and or even if they get 50% better and they can function 50% better, right? Like that's amazing in my opinion.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, because that's what it's all about, right? Being able to live your life.
Yeah.
And I have the privilege of being able to talk to medical students a couple times a year. I'm usually part of
Oh,
a patient panel at Oregon Health and Science University.
yeah.
And when I go, the main things that are in my heart that I want to get across to our, next generation doctors is that first of all, listen to us, believe us. If we tell you something, like trust us, we know our bodies better than you,
Yeah.
do that. And remember that every conversation you have is not about the pain. It's not about the symptoms. It's about my ability to live my life. So
Yeah.
if you're telling me we need to reduce my opioid medication because of the
Yeah.
risks, you need to understand that what I'm hearing is that's reducing my ability to live my life,
Exactly.
right? So we need to shift that thinking and that paradigm and start thinking more about it's about quality of life,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
sometimes that means reduction of pain, reduction of symptoms, but sometimes that just means learning new ways to do life,
Right.
right?
Right. Reframing your expectations. And I mean, there's no right way to do it, like you said. Like it's I think there's so many variables. And, as I'm hitting my midlife stride, it's like, even if, I was feeling 10 years younger than I am, I mean, the truth is I'm getting older too, Tammy. So I think, a lot of it plays into it. Like, all of us, even if we're healthy, we age and we lose some degree of function and capacity. And I think half the battle with any chronic condition is how much function can I get back, and what's realistic and reasonable for what I want to be doing in my life at any given stage of life, too, right? And I think that's just part of the process of like aging through life, is you're going to not be able to do necessarily what you did in your 20s or your 30s if you're an older person. And that's where coaching can be very, very helpful too. Is just getting clear on like, great, you have these goals, and do we need to maybe look at, are some of these like realistic for like even in best case scenario, like where you could land, right?
Right, right. And I think when we have these chronic health conditions that have maybe been going on for decades, right?
Mhm.
Sometimes we think back to, I wish I could get back to the way I was before,
Yeah.
but we forget that age piece of it, right?
Yes.
I
Yes.
mean, I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia at 35. I was diagnosed with migraine at, I think, 17, maybe.
Yeah.
I am never going to go back and be like I was before I was diagnosed with migraines. Like
Totally.
I'm never going to be a teenager again, right?
No.
And so we need to keep that aging piece
Mhm.
in mind, because we're never going to be able to turn back time. We might be able to, get your chronic illness in remission even, right?
Yeah.
But we can't make you younger.
Right, right, right. So true, so true. And I know as like a former hardcore athlete, I don't really have any like, dreams of doing that anymore, but I still enjoy exercise, and sometimes I'm like, wow, like I've really lost capacity like since I was in my 20s, but then I'm like, well, maybe that's kind of normal though too. So I think part of it is even like energy output and all of that. Like, as you age, your body isn't going to have this like crazy reserve of energy, healthy or ill, right? Like, if you're ill, you have to adjust it even more. But yeah, all of that just starts to kind of like change, and it's the process, and you can still have a great life, but part of that greatness is also giving yourself, I think, more rest, more recuperation, just more grace to not have such high expectations for output and getting things done as well, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And the older I get too, the more I realize that may have limits on my capacity because of whatever health reason, right?
Yeah.
But the other mid 50-year-olds out there, they probably have limitations on what they can do too. Like maybe they got bad knees, maybe they're starting to get arthritis, maybe, I mean, we, the older you get, the more everybody's got limitations.
That's it.
Right.
That's
And
totally
so it's comforting to me. And I try to remind my clients of that, you might need to sit down and rest, but there's somebody else out there who probably does too.
totally, totally, totally. It's kind of like the aging sort of levels the playing field a little bit, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
whether you've got a diagnosis of fibromyalgia or IBS or whatever it is, just as you get older, your average peer group is going to be struggling with something, even if they're not diagnosed with anything. And so I think that can be comforting. Like you said, you don't feel like you're as much that only person in your family or your peer group that's struggling with this condition that nobody else has or understands, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything else about fibromyalgia that you feel people don't necessarily understand, or is often misunderstood, that you want to speak on, Tammy?
We've covered a lot of them, right? So
Yeah.
fibromyalgia is not just a women's condition. Men can be diagnosed too. And I think the longer we go, the more even that's going to become.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of things that can be done to treat and manage fibromyalgia. So if you have fibro and you are really struggling and your doctor doesn't know what to do with you, I'm not surprised. But there are people out there who do, right? So you may think you've tried everything,
Mhm.
but you've just tried everything you know to try. You've tried everything maybe your doctor knows to try, but there are absolutely answers out there. This is a real physical condition with real things going wrong with your body that we actually have to work on. And there are a lot of things within your control too that you can tweak and change, and talking to somebody who's been there done that can be super super helpful with that. So I think
Yeah.
those are really like the main things about fibromyalgia that I want people to know. This is real. We really can do stuff. You don't have to live the way you are. You can get better.
I love it. So good. So
Yeah.
good. I love that. Yeah. And I second that 100%. If based on what I've seen, and I don't work directly with fibromyalgia, but certainly other chronic inflammatory disorders, that's just so spot on. And yeah, commonly people will say, like, I've tried everything. Well, you probably haven't actually. So,
I promise you, I have never had a client yet tell me, oh, yeah, I tried everything that you've said.
yes,
There's
100%.
always something.
100%, 100%, which is why it's like having that person who can be just a few steps ahead of you, who's got a lot of experience and expertise in that area, really can be the game changer, I think. So, well, Tammy, I know you have a summit coming up very soon, so I'd like you to share a little bit about that.
Yes, absolutely. So we had done our first summit back in January and had so much fun that we are crazy enough to do it again. And we thought we would do this year's in October so that we could help you prepare for the holidays. So our focus is really on helping you navigate the holidays with less pain and more joy. So to help you give yourself more grace, some practical tips on like how to navigate food choices at the holidays or managing your energy when there's all these things going on. How do you be the mom you want to be and still not end up in a horrible flare because of it? So those are our topics. So it is free to join the summit. We do have a VIP upgrade with some extra goodies if people are interested in that. But our kickoff, our very first day is October 13th. It is me and 7 of my coaches. So it's real fibro people who have actually found ways to feel better, sharing with you what they know. So this isn't a bunch of talking heads. These are real people who have really gotten better and can, help guide you with that. We just have one speaker a day, Monday through Friday for 2 weeks. So we've got 10 talks, and we would love to have you guys join us. The URL to register is just fibrowellnesssummit.com. Just make sure you get 3 S's in the middle. It's kind of weird. Fibrowellnesssummit.com. When you type it out, it looks really weird.
Now that you say that, I'm like, oh yeah, that is 3 S's. Well, I will put it in the show notes so it's linkable, and that way people watching the episode can go ahead and register. And I mean, I might just suggest, even if you don't have fibromyalgia, because trying to navigate the holidays, any chronic illness, you're probably going to pick up some great tips just
Oh, for
participating
sure.
and listening in. So, and I love the fact that you're doing such a focused talk per day. I think that's amazing, Tammy, because having been on some summits, I mean, they've all been great experiences, but sometimes I think it can get a little bit overwhelming with multiple people all on a panel sharing information. And I can't imagine from the recipient standpoint trying to like, okay, now who said what? And like, you know what I mean? So I love your setup. That sounds amazing.
Yes, yes, that was really one of our big considerations going in. Like we're fibro people, we know you're fibro people, right? And
Mhm.
so how do we make that doable for a fibro person, right?
Yeah.
So we've got recordings for you. The recordings are available for a couple of weeks. There's just a lot of things. One speaker, trying to keep it, 45 minutes or less. We even are doing it as a private podcast. So, we're recording a podcast right here. So if you're listening to this, you are a podcast person, you can
Yeah.
actually get the summit delivered straight to your favorite podcast app.
Oh, that's amazing. That would be like so convenient. People could just put that on when they're driving or out
That's
walking their
right.
dogs or whatever.
That's
Cause like
right.
that's how I consume all content, even books nowadays, because it's just so much easier and I have more time when I'm on the go to get that content in than being a busy, business person, mom,
Oh,
and all
yeah.
that, just like a lot of your people are. So,
Right. You can't be
oh,
stuck at your computer watching, whatever's happening. It doesn't always work that way.
no, not at
And our
all.
brains, fibro brains, don't always work according to somebody else's schedule, right?
Totally.
So we've tried to make it as easy as possible and accessible as possible.
Oh, that's great. That's such a super idea. I love that. So, well, good. Well, I will post that information in the soap notes so everybody will be able to access that. And it has been such a pleasure having you on, Tammy. I love the insight and the experience and wisdom you've brought on fibromyalgia. Certainly not a topic that I've gotten to dive into. So I'm super happy we got to have this conversation today.
Yes, me too. And we'll have to have you on the fibromyalgia podcast to
I would love that.
flip the roles there.
I would love that. I look forward to that.
Did you find this episode informative and helpful? I'd love to have you leave me a 5-star rating. Do you have questions about holistic approaches to optimizing gut health that you'd like to ask? Please leave your question or comment below, and I will be sure to address it personally or cover it in a future episode. Be sure to check the show notes for any resources mentioned in today's episode. See you next time.